At my parents' anniversary, Mom joked about my sister's crush on my husband in front of everyone. She's got a huge crush on her sister's husband. The table laughed. I confronted them, shaking with fury. Then my husband stood up and said one sentence that made her face turn pale with rage. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. It arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just gotten home from the grocery store, my arms full of bags, and there it was, sitting on the welcome mat. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope with my name and my husband Mark's name written in elegant, swirling calligraphy. I knew what it was before I even opened it. My hands felt a little shaky as I slit the seal. Inside, the card was just as fancy as the envelope. Heavy cardstock, gold-embossed letters. Carol and Richard request the pleasure of your company to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary. You'd think a daughter would feel happy, right? Proud, even. 20 years is a long time. It's a milestone. But holding that invitation, all I felt was a cold, heavy dread settling in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't about my parents. I love them, I do, in that complicated way you love the people who raised you. No, this feeling, this deep, gut-twisting anxiety, it was all because of my sister, Stacy. Family gatherings are supposed to be about connection. For me, they were minefields. And Stacy was always the one holding the detonator. I put the invitation on the kitchen counter, right next to a bag of apples, and just stared at it. It looked so innocent, so celebratory. But to me, it felt like a summons. A court date I couldn't get out of. I walked over to the coffee maker and started a new pot, even though it was 3 in the afternoon. My hands needed something to do. As the machine gurgled to life, the phone rang. Caller ID showed it was my mom, Carol. Of course. Brenda, honey. Did you get it? Her voice was unnaturally cheerful, the way it always was when she wanted something. Just got it, Mom. It's beautiful, I said, trying to inject some warmth into my voice. Oh, I'm so glad. Your father and I are just so excited. It's going to be a big affair, you know. All the cousins are coming, even your Aunt Jean from out of state. It's so important that you and Mark are there. It wouldn't be a family celebration without my 2 girls. My 2 girls. The phrase hung in the air. On the surface, it sounded sweet. But I knew the reality. We weren't a team. We were a competition. And in my mother's eyes, it was a competition I'd always won, and Stacy had always lost. A fact my mother never let either of us forget. We'll check our calendars, Mom, I said, my voice non-committal. Check your calendars? Brenda, this is our 20th anniversary. It's on a Saturday. What could you possibly have that's more important? The cheerfulness in her voice was gone, replaced by a sharp, guilt-tripping edge. It was a tone I knew all too well. I know, Mom. It's just, you know how things can be with Mark's job. I'll talk to him, I lied. Mark's job had nothing to do with it. This was about me. About my inability to face another evening of walking on eggshells, of watching Stacy flirt shamelessly with my husband while my parents smiled and acted like it was the most charming thing in the world. We ended the call a few minutes later with my vague promise to be there. I poured my coffee, my hand trembling slightly. I stood there, leaning against the counter, and just let the memories wash over me. The memories of why the thought of being in the same room with my sister filled me with such a profound sense of dread. My sister Stacy and I are only 2 years apart, but we might as well have been raised on different planets. Our mother, Carol, spent a few years in the military before she had us, and she never quite let that mindset go. Our childhood wasn't about nurturing. It was about training. Everything, and I mean everything, was a competition. It started small. Who can get their shoes on fastest? Who can set the table first? It seemed harmless, maybe even a way to make chores fun. But it slowly morphed into something else. It wasn't about doing your best, it was about being the best. It was about beating your sister. I was a quiet kid, a bookworm. School came easily to me. I got good grades, brought home glowing report cards, and won a few academic awards. In my mother's eyes, I was the successful one, the benchmark. And that made me the stick she used to beat Stacy with. Stacy was different. She wasn't built for a classroom. She was vibrant and imaginative, happiest when she was outside, making up games, getting her hands dirty. Sitting still with a book was torture for her. Her grades were average, sometimes below. And my mother saw this not as a difference in personality, but as a failure. A failure on Stacy's part. I remember one afternoon in 4th grade. I'd gotten a perfect score on a math test. My mom taped it to the refrigerator. Later that day, Stacy brought home her report card. It had a couple of C's on it. I was in the living room, trying to read, but I could hear their voices from the kitchen. A C in English? Stacy, your sister gets straight A's. Why can't you be more like your sister? My mother's voice was cold, disappointed. I tried, Mom. Stacy's voice was small, trembling. Trying isn't enough. You have to apply yourself. Look at Brenda. She applies herself. You're just lazy. That night, Stacy wasn't allowed to have dessert. She had to sit at the kitchen table and do extra homework while I sat in the living room with my dad, eating a bowl of ice cream, feeling like a traitor. The guilt was a physical thing, a sour knot in my stomach. My mother even made me tutor her. I didn't mind helping, I wanted to. But it was impossible. The pressure was too much. Every session would end in frustration, with Stacy staring blankly at the page and me feeling helpless. She wasn't stupid, she just learned differently. But our mother didn't see that. She just saw one daughter who was a reflection of her own ambition and another who was a disappointment. The constant comparisons hollowed Stacy out. She started to resent me, and I couldn't blame her. I was the living, breathing embodiment of her failure. And I resented my mother for putting me in that position. I didn't want to be the golden child. It was a lonely, terrifying pedestal to be on. One wrong step, one B on a report card, and I knew the same disappointment would be turned on me. I tried to talk to my mom about it once. I told her she was being too hard on Stacy. She sent me to my room for talking back. That was the end of that. We just continued on, the two of us, trapped in the roles our mother had assigned us, the winner and the loser. The competition, the pressure, the constant feeling of never being good enough, it all came to a head this summer before I left for college. I was so excited for a fresh start, for a life where I wasn't just Stacy's successful older sister. I was packing my dorm room essentials, making lists, dreaming of freedom. And while I was looking toward the future, my sister was trapped in a past she couldn't escape. I came home one evening from a friend's house to find an ambulance in our driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs. I ran inside, my mind racing through 100 horrible possibilities. I found my parents in the living room. My dad, Richard, was pale, his face ashen. My mom was sitting rigidly on the sofa, staring at the wall, her hands clenched in her lap. What's going on? Where's Stacy? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My dad just looked at me, his eyes full of a pain I'd never seen before. It's Stacy, honey, he said. She took a whole bottle of sleeping pills. The world tilted on its axis. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. They had found her in her room, just in time. The paramedics said a few more minutes, and it would have been too late. They were able to save her, but something inside our family broke that night. And it never fully healed. That night was a wake-up call for my parents, especially my mother. It was as if a blindfold had been ripped from her eyes. For the first time, she was forced to see the immense pain Stacy had been hiding behind a mask of sullen indifference for years. It took something that catastrophic, something that close to the ultimate tragedy, for them to understand the damage their pressure had caused. After Stacy came home from the hospital, everything changed. My parents started taking her to therapy sessions. And they began to treat her like she was made of the most delicate, fragile glass. The constant pushing and criticism were replaced by a smothering, suffocating caution. One wrong word, one hint of pressure, they feared, might shatter her completely. I tried to talk to her. Over the years, I apologized so many times. I told her how sorry I was for not standing up for her more, for not seeing how much she was hurting. I tried to bridge the chasm that had opened up between us. But it was no use. The damage was done. And I felt like my parents, in their effort to make up for the past, were crippling her future. They were so terrified of a repeat incident that they swung to the opposite extreme. Stacy, who was smart and manipulative in her own way, quickly learned how to use their fear to her advantage. The dynamic in our house shifted permanently. The pedestal I was on had crumbled, and now Stacy was the one at the center of their universe, a fragile, broken idol they worshipped out of guilt and fear. After the overdose, Stacy held a kind of power over my parents, a power she learned to wield with devastating precision. The unspoken threat was always there: push me, and I might break again. When she graduated from high school, my mother gently suggested she look at some local colleges. Stacy's response was immediate and effective. She locked herself in her room, refused to eat, and told my parents that the pressure of leaving home would be too much for her to handle. The college talk stopped immediately. And so, she stayed. While I was away at college, earning a degree, figuring out my future, Stacy was at home, solidifying her position as the permanent child of the household. She never got a steady job. She'd work for a few weeks here and there, a retail gig, a receptionist position, but it never lasted. There was always a reason: the boss was mean, the coworkers were annoying, the work was boring. She would quit or get fired, and she would come home to the safety net of my parents' guilt. Now, years later, she's a grown woman still living in her childhood bedroom. She doesn't pay rent. She doesn't buy her own groceries. My parents, now retired and living on a fixed income, cover everything. Her car insurance, her cell phone bill, her spending money for nights out with a questionable group of friends. To be clear, Stacy doesn't have any diagnosed mental illness that prevents her from functioning. She goes to therapy occasionally, when she feels like it. She's not struggling in the way she was as a teenager. She has a social life. She goes to parties. But it's all funded by our parents. About a year ago, my mom called me, her voice full of worry. "Brenda, honey, your father and I were looking at our finances. Things are getting a little tight with the retirement funds. We were wondering if you could maybe help out a little each month? Just to cover some of the bills." I felt a hot flash of anger crawl up my neck. I took a deep breath. "Mom, I can't," I said, my voice firm. "You can't? But your salary from your promotion, you and Mark are doing so well. We just need a little help." "No, Mom. I can't send you money every month while Stacy lives there for free, contributing nothing. She is a capable adult. She needs to get a job and take some responsibility." The line went silent for a moment. Then my mother's voice came back, cold and wounded. "You don't understand what she's been through. We can't push her. You know what could happen." And that was it. The trump card. The ultimate shutdown to any conversation about Stacy's accountability. I knew then that nothing would ever change. They were trapped in a cycle of fear, and Stacy was the one holding the keys to the cage. Sending them money wouldn't be helping them, it would be enabling her. It would be paying for her to continue living a life without consequences. And I just couldn't do it. My refusal to help financially created a new layer of tension in the family, but the biggest problem, the one that made my skin crawl, was Stacy's behavior toward my husband, Mark. Mark is a good man. He's kind, steady, and has a great sense of humor. He's also incredibly patient, a quality that was tested every single time we were around my family. He knew my entire family history, and from the beginning, he couldn't stand my sister. And it wasn't just because she was a freeloader. It was because she was relentlessly, inappropriately flirty with him. From the day she met him, Stacy acted like he was her own personal entertainment. She would find excuses to stand too close to him, to touch his arm when she was talking. She'd make suggestive jokes that were just on the edge of inappropriate, and if I called her out on it, she would just laugh and say, "Oh my God, Brenda, I'm just kidding. Can't you take a joke?" What made it 1,000 times worse was my parents' reaction. They saw it. They heard it. And they did nothing. In fact, they seemed to encourage it. They dismiss her behavior as a harmless, innocent crush. The first time Mark came to my parents' house for dinner, we were all sitting in the living room, making small talk. Mark, who was just my boyfriend at the time, told a funny story from work. My mom laughed a little too loudly and then looked at him with a strange, appraising look. "You're really funny, Mark," she said. "You know, you'd actually be a much better match for my other daughter, Stacy. You two have the same kind of humor." I froze. Mark's smile faltered for a second. We both tried to laugh it off, assuming it was a weird, awkward joke. But then my dad chimed in. "She's right, you know. Our Stacy is the fun one. Someone like her would probably be more fun for you." I felt like I'd been slapped. They were sitting right next to me, their daughter, essentially telling my boyfriend he'd chosen the wrong sister. Over the years, it became a recurring theme. They'd make little comments, always framed as a joke. "Mark and Stacy are so similar, they're like two peas in a pod." Or, "Look at them laughing together. He really gets her." It was as if they were trying to plant a seed, to push a narrative that he was with the wrong person. It was sick. It was disrespectful. And every time it happened, a little piece of me would just shrivel up inside. We started going to fewer and fewer family events. It was easier to just stay away. But for the big things, holidays, birthdays, we were expected to show up and play our parts in their bizarre family drama. The absolute lowest point, the moment that almost shattered my relationship with my parents for good, happened on my wedding day. You're supposed to feel beautiful, loved, and supported on your wedding day. I felt like I was on trial. The ceremony was about to start in 30 minutes. I was in the bridal suite with my bridesmaids, my stomach a flutter of nerves and excitement. My mom came in, told me how beautiful I looked, and gave me a hug that felt a little too tight. Then she said, "I need to go find Mark for a second, just to give him a little pep talk." I thought it was sweet. A mother-in-law welcoming her new son into the family. I found out later what that pep talk really was. While I was putting on my veil, my mother pulled Mark aside in the hallway. He told me about it later that night, after the reception, when all the guests were gone. He said she'd grabbed his arm, her expression deadly serious, and asked him, "Are you sure you want to do this, Mark? Are you absolutely sure you want to marry Brenda?" He was stunned. He thought she was joking at first, but she wasn't smiling. She continued, "It's not too late to back out. Just think about it. Really think about it." She was giving him one last chance to escape, to leave me standing at the altar. As if she was hoping he would suddenly realize he was making a terrible mistake and that he should have been with Stacy all along. When Mark told me this, the joy of the day just evaporated. I felt a wave of nausea. My own mother, on my wedding day, had tried to convince my husband-to-be to leave me. Who does that? What kind of mother does that to her own daughter? We were on our honeymoon when I finally called her. I didn't scream. My voice was dangerously calm. "How could you, Mom? I asked. She immediately got defensive. Oh, Brenda, you're being so dramatic. I was just nervous for him. It's a big commitment. I would have said that to any groom. But we both knew that was a lie. It wasn't about just any groom. It was about Mark. And it was about Stacy. I didn't talk to her for months after that. I needed space. I needed to build a wall around my new marriage to protect it from the toxicity of my own family. Eventually, they apologized. A hollow, half-hearted apology that was more about getting me back in their lives than acknowledging their own twisted behavior. They promised they would never cross that line again, that they would respect our marriage. For a little while, they did. But the subtle digs, the little jokes, and the constant, creepy encouragement of Stacy's crush on my husband never really stopped. The wound from my wedding day never really closed. It just scabbed over, waiting for the next inevitable moment when they would pick at it again. After the wedding incident, Mark and I created a firm boundary. We drastically reduced our visits. We'd see my parents for a quick lunch now and then, but we avoided any big family gatherings that included Stacy. No birthdays, no holidays. It was easier, safer. Our peace of mind was more important than keeping up appearances. So when the invitation to their 20th anniversary party arrived, my immediate, instinctual response was a hard no. I put it on the counter and for 2 days, I didn't even mention it to Mark. I didn't want to bring that cloud of family drama into our peaceful home. But on the third night, he saw it. I was making dinner, and he was sorting through the mail. "What's this?" he asked, holding up the fancy envelope. I sighed, turning off the stove. "It's my parents' 20th anniversary party," I said. I was going to throw it away. "You don't want to go?" "Of course I don't want to go, Mark. You know what will happen. Stacy will be there, acting like an idiot. My mom will make her weird comments. My dad will just sit there and let it happen. It's the same nightmare every single time. I'm done." He was quiet for a minute, looking at the invitation. I expected him to agree, to say, "You're right, let's not go." But he didn't. He looked up at me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "What if we did things differently this time?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we went?" he said. "Think about it, Brenda. If we don't go, they'll just make up some story for the relatives. They'll play the victim. Oh, Brenda is just so busy, she couldn't be bothered to come to her own parents' anniversary. They'll control the narrative, like they always do." He had a point. I could already hear my mother's sad, martyred voice on the phone with my aunts. He continued, "But if we go, and if they step out of line, which we both know they will, it will be the perfect opportunity. We can finally put them in their place. In front of everyone. In front of the entire family. There will be no way for them to twist the story later. No way for them to deny what they said or did. There will be witnesses." I stared at him. The idea was terrifying. A public confrontation? It went against every instinct I had, every lesson I'd learned about just keeping my head down and surviving. But it was also electrifying. The thought of finally saying everything I'd held inside for years, of not letting them get away with it anymore. "You really think we should do that?" I asked, my voice hesitant. "I think we're tired of running, Brenda," he said, taking my hand. "I'm tired of seeing them hurt you. Let's stop playing defense. Let's go, and if they start a fire, we'll be the ones to finish it." We stood there in the kitchen for a long time. The idea slowly took root in my mind. He was right. We couldn't keep living like this, cowering in fear of the next family event. It was time to stop reacting and start acting. It was a huge risk. It could go horribly wrong and blow up our family for good. But then I thought, what was there left to save? Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Okay. Let's go. The night of the party, I felt like a soldier heading into battle. I picked up my dress, a simple, elegant navy blue one, with the care of someone choosing their armor. Mark looked handsome and calm in his suit, but I could see the tension in his jaw. We were a united front. We drove to the rented hall where the party was being held. It was already crowded, filled with the familiar faces of aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in years. As we walked in, my mother rushed over to us, her face beaming. Brenda! Mark! You came. Oh, I'm so happy to see you. She hugged me tightly. I was so worried you wouldn't make it. Wouldn't miss it, Mom, I said, managing a small smile. For the first hour or so, things were surprisingly normal. We mingled. We made small talk with relatives. My Aunt Jean told me I looked wonderful. My Uncle Bob asked Mark about his work. Stacy was across the room, surrounded by a group of younger cousins, and she seemed to be ignoring us, which was a relief. We sat down for dinner at a large, round table with my parents, Stacy, and a few aunts and uncles. The conversation was light. People were catching up, laughing about old memories. For a fleeting moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, Mark's plan wouldn't be necessary. Maybe they had finally learned. Maybe this time would be different. It was a foolish hope, I know. It was the hope of a daughter who, deep down, just wanted a normal family. My dad, Richard, stood up and gave a toast. He talked about his 20 years with my mom, his voice thick with emotion. People clapped. My mom blushed. It was a perfect picture of a happy, loving family. A complete and utter lie, but a beautiful picture nonetheless. The food was served. We were talking about something mundane, I think it was the rising cost of property taxes, when one of my aunts, sitting next to my mom, turned to Stacy. So, Stacy, she said playfully. All of your cousins are married off or in serious relationships. What about you? Are you hiding a secret boyfriend somewhere? The table quieted a little, everyone looking at Stacy. This was the moment. The tiny crack in the dam. I could feel it. I saw Mark subtly shift in his chair. The calm was over. The storm was about to hit. Stacy just blushed and smiled awkwardly, tucking a piece of hair behind her ear. She looked like a shy schoolgirl, not a grown woman. She was eating up the attention. One of my cousins from another table yelled playfully, "Come on, Stacy. Spill. Who's the lucky guy?" And that's when my mother, without skipping a beat, decided to drop the bomb. She laughed, a high, tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge, and pointed her fork toward Mark. "Oh, I don't know if she has a boyfriend," she announced loudly, for the whole table to hear. "But she's got a huge crush on her sister's husband." A few people at the table chuckled uncomfortably. My father laughed right along with her, slapping the table lightly. I just stared at my mother, a hot, white-hot rage building in my chest. She didn't even look at me. She was too busy leaning toward my aunt, elaborating on Stacy's long-standing crush, as if it were the most adorable family anecdote. Stacy didn't stop her. She didn't say, "Mom, that's not funny." She just sat there, blushing deeper, soaking it all in as if it were a compliment. Then, as if that wasn't humiliating enough, my aunt turned to my husband. "Well, Mark," she said, her voice loud and careless, "do you have any handsome brothers or cousins you could set Emily up with?" My face was burning. I felt the eyes of everyone at the table on us. This was it. This was the line. They had crossed it again, more spectacularly than ever before. We had a plan. I wasn't going to sit there and take it. I set my fork down with a loud clink that made everyone look at me. I turned to my mother, and my voice, when it came out, was low and shaking with fury. "How dare you," I said. The entire table fell silent. How dare you talk about my husband like that? I looked at both of my parents. You promised me. Both of you. You swore you wouldn't cross this line again. You swore you would respect our marriage, respect us. But here we are, laughing about my sister having a crush on my husband. You think this is funny? I didn't wait for an answer. I turned to the rest of the table, my voice getting louder. Let me ask you all a question. How many of you think it's okay for a mother to openly mock her daughter's marriage like this? To encourage this creepy obsession? Do any of you think this is normal? No one said a word. They just stared at their plates. Then, I turned to Stacy. And you, I spat. You have been acting like a complete creep toward my husband for years. You flirt with him every chance you get. You send him late-night texts that he has never, ever responded to and has asked you to stop sending. You touch him when he is visibly uncomfortable, and you laugh it off like it's all a game. Stacy's face fell. The cute, blushing act was gone, replaced by a look of pure shock. This isn't a joke, I said, my voice ringing through the silent hall. It's harassment. And you all, I looked around the table again, at my stunned relatives, you all think it's funny? My mother finally found her voice. It was trembling, but she was trying to regain control, to smooth everything over. Brenda, come on, you're making a scene. It was just a joke. It's not a big deal. It's just an innocent crush. We've always joked about it. An innocent crush? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. She's a grown woman, Mom. It's not innocent, it's pathetic. And you encouraging it is sick. My father looked like he was about to explode. His face was red, his hand tightening on the table. That's enough, Brenda, he growled. You are disrespecting your mother. Disrespecting her? I shot back. You want to talk about disrespect? You two have disrespected me and my marriage for years. You did it on my wedding day. You have any idea how twisted that is? My mother started to tear up, the classic move to gain sympathy. I didn't mean to offend anyone, she whimpered. It really is funny. And that's when my husband, Mark, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on my mother. His voice was calm, almost conversational, which made it all the more chilling. Oh, I get it, Carol, he said. Since everything is a joke to you. I guess cheating on your own husband was just for fun, too, right? The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The look on my mother's face, it was something I'll never forget. She froze, her eyes wide with a mixture of pure terror and disbelief. My dad's jaw went slack. My aunt's hand was halfway to her mouth. Mark kept going, his voice still level. I mean, what about that innocent crush you had on the neighbor, Carol? Was that just a joke, too? I guess when you decided to sleep with him, it didn't mean anything. It was all just for laughs, wasn't it? He let the words hang in the air, a poison dart that had hit its target perfectly. The ugly little secret they had buried for years, the one my dad had decided to forgive to keep the family together, the one I had confided in my husband in a moment of pain, was now out in the open for everyone to see. And right there, in that moment of deafening silence, everything changed forever. If you've made it this far into my story, do me a huge favor and hit that like button and comment the number 1 down below. That way, I'll know you're here with me on this crazy journey. Your support means the world to me and really keeps me going. So please, comment with a number 1, and then I'll tell you what happened next. The silence was shattered by my mother's shriek. It wasn't a cry of sadness, it was a howl of pure rage. The victim act was gone. You have no right, she screamed at Mark, pointing a shaking finger at him. You have no right to bring that up. You have crossed a line. My father, finally snapping out of his shock, stood up so fast his chair almost fell over. Get out, he roared at Mark. You are a low, disrespectful piece of trash. Get out of my house. Except it wasn't his house, it was a rented hall, but the sentiment was clear. I stood up too, moving to stand beside my husband. He's not going anywhere without me, I said, my voice steady. And you crossed the line the moment you turned my husband into the punchline of your sick jokes. The moment you defended Stacy, who has been making him uncomfortable for years, like she's some harmless child. I looked at Stacy, who was now crying. You started this, Stacy. None of this would be happening if you hadn't sat there basking in the attention. You let Mom announce your creepy crush like it was some kind of prize. You always have to be the victim, she sobbed. While the three of them, my mother, my father, and my sister, started yelling, a chaotic symphony of blame and denial, Mark and I just looked at each other. Our job was done. There was no point in staying any longer. Their narrative was shattered, and they were left to stand in the wreckage. I held up my hand. We're leaving, I announced over the noise. They stopped yelling for a second to look at me. It's over. Don't you dare contact us again until you are ready to grow up and take responsibility for your actions. If that day never comes, I paused, letting the finality of my words sink in, then don't call us when one of you is on your deathbed. And with that, we turned around and walked out. We didn't look back. We could hear the shouting start up again behind us as we pushed through the doors and into the cool night air. We got in the car, and for a minute, we just sat there in silence. Then, Mark started to chuckle. A low, relieved chuckle. I started laughing too. It wasn't a happy laugh, it was a laugh of pure, unadulterated relief. The laugh of two people who had just pulled the pin on a grenade they'd been forced to carry for years. On the drive home, my phone started buzzing. It was texts from cousins and my Aunt Jean. I am so sorry. We had no idea. Your mother was way out of line. Are you okay? We're on your side. Even my aunt from the dinner table texted me, I am so sorry for my part in that. I never should have said what I said. The validation was nice, but it didn't matter as much as the feeling of freedom. We had finally done it. We had ripped the Band-Aid off. It was messy, it was ugly, but it was done. We were free. The weeks following the party were eerily quiet. My parents left a few voicemails, alternating between rage and tearful pleading, which we ignored. We had drawn our line in the sand. We thought that would be the end of it. We thought they would finally leave us alone. We were wrong. The silence wasn't peace, it was just the quiet before Stacy decided to escalate things to a terrifying new level. About 6 months passed. Mark and I had settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. Then, the letters started arriving. They were addressed to Mark at his office. The first one was just weird. It was a long, rambling letter from Stacy about how she felt they had a special connection and how she knew he was unhappy with me. Mark showed it to me, and we were both just disgusted. He threw it away and we tried to forget about it. But then another one came. And another. They got progressively stranger, filled with delusional romantic fantasies. We told her to stop. We sent a formal text telling her that this was harassment and if it continued, we would involve the police. She didn't seem to care. Around this time, Mark and I received the most amazing news. I was pregnant. We were overjoyed. After everything we'd been through, it felt like a new beginning. We announced it on social media, sharing our happiness with friends and family, the ones who had supported us anyway. That was a mistake. A week later, Mark came home from work looking pale and shaken. I met him at the door, my heart instantly pounding. What's wrong? I asked. She was here, Brenda, he said, his voice strained. Stacy. She was sitting on our front porch. just waiting for me. My blood ran cold. He said he'd seen her as he pulled into the driveway. He didn't even get out of the car. He immediately put it in reverse and drove away as she ran toward the car, begging him to stop and talk to her. He called me from down the street, and we both called the police right away. Because we had already documented the letters, the police took it very seriously. They found her still wandering around our neighborhood and took her into custody. My parents bailed her out, of course. But this was the final straw. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was stalking. This was dangerous. We immediately hired a lawyer. He told us that with the evidence of the letters and her showing up at our house, we had a strong case. We filed for a restraining order, and we decided to press charges. Our lawyer warned us that a criminal trial could be expensive, especially if my parents decided to hire a high-powered attorney for Stacy, potentially costing them tens of thousands of dollars. Honestly, that thought brought me a dark sense of satisfaction. With their retirement income and Stacy contributing nothing, a massive legal bill would be a form of justice in itself. If they wanted to continue enabling her dangerous behavior, then they could pay for it. Literally. The legal process is slow, but it is thorough. Stacy, in her delusion, seemed to think she was the romantic hero of some tragic story. The law saw it differently. The first victory came quickly. The restraining order was granted. Less than a month later, she violated it. She tried to approach Mark again in the parking lot of his office. That mistake cost my parents their bail money and landed Stacy in jail until her trial. The trial itself was a nightmare, but a necessary one. We had to testify, to lay out the whole ugly story in a cold, sterile courtroom. My parents sat behind Stacy, looking old and defeated. They had paid for a decent lawyer, but there's no defense for a mountain of creepy letters and a clear pattern of stalking. Stacy lost. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in jail, followed by a long period of mandatory, court-ordered therapy. Justice wasn't just a satisfying confrontation at a dinner party, it was a gavel striking down, a cell door closing. The fallout from the trial was the final blow to what was left of my family. The public humiliation, the financial ruin from the legal fees, and the undeniable proof of what their daughter had become was too much for my father. A few months after the sentencing, he filed for divorce from my mother. The man who had silently enabled her toxicity for decades finally found his backbone. The revelation of her affair, which had been exposed so brutally at the party, was cited in the divorce proceedings. It turns out that secret had been a cancer in their marriage for years. The extended family, who had been sympathetic to us after the party, completely abandoned my mother and Stacy. They were ostracized. Social media in our small town had a field day with the story. They became the local pariahs. After the divorce, my father sold the family home to pay off debts and moved out of state to start over. My mother and Stacy, once she was released, had to find work. They couldn't afford to live on savings anymore. They ended up moving a few towns over, where nobody knew their story. And us? While all of that chaos was unfolding, our lives were becoming more beautiful than I could have imagined. Our son was born. He is healthy, happy, and has my husband's smile. Our home is quiet. It is peaceful. It is safe. Sometimes I feel a pang of sadness for the family I wish I'd had. But then I look at my husband and our beautiful child, and I know that we didn't just survive. We built something better. We broke the cycle. We chose peace over performance, and sanity over obligation. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, but it was worth it. We are finally, truly free. And so, this story leaves us with a profound reminder about the power of boundaries, self-respect, and the courage it takes to break free from toxic cycles. It's not easy to stand up against those we love, especially when the ties of family are tangled with pain, guilt, and manipulation. But sometimes, choosing peace means walking away from what no longer serves our growth. True strength lies in knowing your worth and refusing to let others diminish it, no matter how deep their roots are in your life. This journey also teaches us the importance of accountability and healing. While the past may shape us, it doesn't have to define us. We cannot change others, but we can choose how we respond to their actions. By protecting their marriage and future, this couple showed us that love, respect, and resilience can prevail even in the face of generational wounds. What about you? What lessons did this story spark in your heart? Share your thoughts below or simply comment good if this reflection resonated with you. Let's continue to inspire each other to build lives filled with love, peace, and purpose.